Oh my, yeah.
Hey guys, Tyler Berger here with BassFishingHQ, and I literally can't believe that I'm making this video. I don't want to give this up. Stay tuned, it's gonna be a really good one. So hey guys, before we get into this video is brought to you by the Bass Hat, which is the hat I am wearing right now. It has a wooden bass on the front right here, and this is actually made out of an old bourbon barrel. It's a really unique hat. Click on the link in the description and you can actually support the channel by buying one of these hats. So like I said in the intro of this video, I really don't want to talk about this particular technique, this particular lure, and I honestly think that this might be one of the best bass lures in the spring. I'm talking from pre-spawn, during the spawn, and post-spawn. This works extremely well, and it works in all phases, which is really unique because there's not a whole lot of lures that work in each one of those phases. But this lure does, and not only that, it catches numbers of fish and it catches big fish. Like, it's literally all around a great lure to throw. And the crazy thing about it is that not a lot of people are doing this. It is an extremely overlooked technique. Honestly, I don't want to make this video because honestly, I shot some of the footage for this video at Lake Norman like 2 years ago, and I was going to make the video then, and I decided, no, I'm not going to. I thought I was going to make it last year, and I said, no, let's not talk about it. And now, here it is today. I'm actually putting out this video. Today, what we're talking about is the good old floating worm. So let's dive into this. So guys, the floating worm is not a new or secret technique by any means. As a matter of fact, this is kind of an old school technique. This is probably as old as the spinnerbait. This is what the older generation knows, but maybe the newer generation doesn't. And whether you're fishing in lakes and reservoirs, rivers, or ponds, like, this lure is absolutely what I think is probably one of the best lures that you can throw in the springtime. And I'm talking pre-spawn, during the spawn, and the post-spawn. I first really got onto this pattern at Lake Norman, actually fishing a Bassmaster Open, where I placed 13th out of like over 200 guys fishing a floating worm, just this exact setup, this exact style. And the crazy thing is that everyone said going to Lake Norman, it's really hard to target largemouth only, but if you can do that, that's typically your big fish. That's typically the bigger fish that you catch. Well, I found that using this floating worm and in this style where I wacky rigged it, 9 out of 10 of the fish that I caught were largemouth. And that's what really helped me in that tournament to do well, because I was able to catch largemouth that other guys weren't. They were better quality, and I did really well in that tournament because of it. So I like to throw my floating worm, actually a wacky rig like this, and I like to throw it with a spinning rod. And we're going to get into equipment in the last segment of this video, so stay tuned if you want to hear about the exact equipment that you need to be able to catch these fish on a floating worm. So when does the floating worm work the best? Really, the floating worm works, like I said, it works in pre-spawn, during the spawn, and post-spawn. It also tends to work the best when you're fishing less than 5 feet of water. Now, you can call fish up from 5 and 6 foot, but really when those fish are shallow, like they are during that pre-spawn and during the whole springtime, this is when this lure really shines. Now, in the pre-spawn, when that water is typically under 60 degrees, this is a great way to trigger big females that are just moving up. And I really like to throw it on a wacky rig because I can work that bait extremely slow during the pre-spawn. And that really slow presentation is something that is really different. And that's what triggers those fish, those big pre-spawn females, to eat that bait. Now, during the spawn, this is a great lure to actually find beds with, because not only will you catch fish that are actually on the beds with the floating worm, but you will also have fish chase this off of their beds, where you can actually then pinpoint exactly where that bed is. So it's a great technique to actually find fish during the spring when fish are on beds. They might actually eat the bait, but if not, typically you can at least see, oh, there's one, because it's following your bait really, really close. Now during the post spawn is another time that this might be the best during the post spawn. When spawn is over and you actually have the fry, the young of the year fry, this is a great way to catch those fry garters. Those fish that are actually guarding those fries, they will fall for a floating worm every single time. Now when it comes to fishing the floating worm, I typically like to have at least 2 or 3 foot of visibility. I like to have clearer water. It can definitely be stained, but you don't want chocolate milk, you don't want super muddy conditions. At least 2 foot of visibility to really have this work well. Now, where do I like to fish this? I like to fish this, like I said, in shallow water. Now, one of the best things that I really like to do with this lure is fish it in different pockets and cuts where I think fish are moving in to spawn, or where they may be spawning, or where they're moving out. Now, if I can find these little side pockets off of creeks and even off of the main lake, I like to target wood, stumps, grass clumps, anything that I can that is a target where these fish might be holding. That's where I really like to fish this bait, in shallow water around cover. If you guys don't think that I actually like to fish this, you might look at this literally giant bag of Zoom trick worms like this. There's like 8 or 9 bags in here. That's how I like to order them, because I know that I'm going to fish this a lot in the springtime. That's how good this lure is. And again, it works all over the country. Now, there's really only 2 colors that I like. And one is pink. I really, really like pink in clear to stained water. That is the number one that I use, kind of that clear to stained water. I'm gonna use pink. And guys, I don't know why these colors work, so don't even ask me. I just know that they do, okay? And I've tried other colors before and they haven't worked quite as well. So this is a Zoom trick worm, which is the one that I use primarily. In bubblegum pink, that's the one that I use. I've caught smallmouth, I've caught spotted bass on this, but I've really caught largemouth a lot on this lure. And for some reason, I think that largemouth tend to like this just a little bit more. Now, the other color that I like besides the bubblegum pink is the color they call Methylate. Now, let me grab some right here. Now, this is Methylate. As you can see, it's almost like this orangish, reddish, pinkish, and it's translucent, but this thing literally like glows. Like, I'm not sure how well you can see it on the camera, but this thing like glows when it's in the water. And because of that glow, I really like to fish this when I'm fishing a little bit more stained. Not muddy, but I really, when I'm fishing stained water, this is the one that I pick up. And I pick it up again because of that glow. It literally just glows in the water. It shows up, and I think the fish find it a little bit better than that pink. So those are the 2 colors that I really, really like. The way that you work this lure is very slow, and you can always see the lure. Keep that in mind. You always can literally see it. I work it within about 1 foot or 2 foot from the surface. Very, very close to the surface. If not right below the surface, like 6 inches below. And what I do is I like to skip this lure underneath overhanging trees, or like I said, anywhere I think a bass might be moving up and staging or spawning. And I basically just like to twitch this bait 3 or 4 times, and it just kind of, in the water, it just kind of pulsates. It's a very light twitch, and it just kind of pulsates a couple times, and then you just let it sink. It sinks super, super slow, slower than a Senko, very, very slow. And then once it drops about 1 foot, I'll pump it a couple more times and then let it fall again. And 9 times out of 10, those bass are gonna hit that bait when it starts to fall. You're gonna pump it a couple times, that bait's gonna start to shimmy and fall, and bam, that's when those bass hit it. It's a very, very simple way of fishing, but it really, really works well. Like, I can't even tell you how much I love to fish this technique, and probably one of the best things about it is you're always able to see that fish actually come up and hit the lure, and it's just visually, it's so awesome. It's like fishing a swim jig just below the surface, where you see them come up and nail it. It is just like that. And because of that, it's really one of the biggest tips that I can tell you about a floating worm is when you see that fish come up and hit it, don't freaking yank right away, okay? Because sometimes they come up and hit it so hard and aggressively that they just get part of the tail or whatever and they don't get the hook. So what I typically do is that fish will hit it and I'll just let them swim for just a second or two and I'll let that line get tight and I'll pull back and set the hook. It's not a real hard hook set. I'm using typically 10 or 12 pound test fluorocarbon with a braided main line. So I don't set the hook really hard, but I do like to get a good hook in. So let's quickly go through the equipment that I like to throw it on. And again, I like to throw a Zoom trick worm for the most part. That's the one I started with, and I just don't see what's wrong with it. You might be able to use other trick worm style baits and have a lot of success with it, but the Zoom trick worm, here's a really important key to this. I like to use a Gamakatsu octopus hook in the 1/0 style. Now this particular hook has a little bit of a kinked eye. I'm not even sure what you call that, but the eye is kind of bent over, and because of that I actually like to snell my knot when I'm tying this particular lure. The other thing that I really like about this hook, if you look straight down this hook, it actually is a little bit offset. You can see that the bend of the hook, it's actually offset. And I'm telling you what, I hook a tremendous amount of fish with this bait. I don't have an issue hooking up with them. I don't have an issue landing these fish. And it's really because of this hook. I like to snell my fishing line onto that hook. And I typically am using 10 pound test fluorocarbon. I will step it up to 12 pound test if I'm dealing with bigger fish around heavy cover. And then I typically have about a 5 to 7 foot long leader, and then my braid is 10 to 15 pound test. Anything in that range will work. 15 pound test works well. I tend to have a lot of 10 on my spinning rods, so I use that a lot too, and it works just fine. When it comes to a rod, the rod is very important here, and I don't want a very long rod when I'm doing this. Anything from 6 foot 6 inch to 7 foot. 7 foot is probably the longest that you want, because a lot of times you are really placing this bait in a really small or tight area. And anytime you're placing a bait in a really small, tight area, you want to use a shorter rod. You're going to be able to cast more precisely and get it exactly where you want. So I typically like a 7 foot medium action rod. And then you have a spinning reel. Now when it comes to a spinning reel, some guys like really big spinning reels. I don't like a small one, but I kind of like that medium blend. This is a 2500 series spinning reel. It's also known as a 25. So if when you're picking out a spinning reel, look for that size 25 or 2500. It pairs up perfectly with a 7 foot spinning rod. This spinning rod I use for a number of different techniques, but it is perfect for the floating worm. So honestly, guys, that's it. Again, I think that this is probably the most overlooked and probably one of the best techniques to use all spring during pre-spawn, spawn, and post-spawn. So guys, please like this video if you enjoyed it. Comment below if you have any questions. Please don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.